I set out to platinum the hit cat game known as Stray, an indie game which absolutely blew up when it came out. You get to do all the fun things a cat normally does, like tearing up carpets and sleeping. Heading into it, I had zero ideas on how to tackle this game, and there were a few concerning trophies that had me a little worried. Like the god-awful speedrunning trophy, and if you guys are anything like me, you fumble under the most little of pressure, but nothing stops an absolute gamer like me from completing a 3 out of 10 difficulty game.
Hi.
Okay.
The game begins with us playing as an orange little cat surrounded by its siblings, so naturally, we decide to disturb all of them and round them up for some much needed beauty rest, especially since there's a substantial amount of thunder and heavy rain pouring down, and that definitely scares me.
Fuck you, Thunder! You can suck my dick! You can't get me, Thunder, cause you're just God's farts.
We wake up to a bright sunny scene and my siblings decide that it's a good time to go for a little stroll. We walk through an industrial site, taking in this game's amazing graphics, and eventually we come across a damaged pipe. We attempt to jump over, but the pipe can't hold our 10 to 12 pound body. So we end up falling off and heading straight into a pit, where all my despair and depression lives. We wake up limping from the inevitable fall damage and pass out as we make our way to the door. We wake back up again for a second time and head under the door where we got our first trophy called Miss Jump, for essentially falling to our death. But now this locks us into completing the game. I begin wandering forward, confused on where to jump before realizing that this cat can jump between literal skyscrapers. As we keep walking forwards, I come across what will be the bane of my existence in this game. These little chuds are absolutely annoying to deal with, and I hope that the developers stub their toe for even thinking of these blood-sucking fiends. We keep walking forward before encountering our first, what I would call, puzzle of the game, which is a simple one that maybe took a little longer than it should have to figure out. But we simply grab the metal cup or container from the bottom and drop it in the insanely fast and high-powered fan, which, to my surprise, does end up working and stopping the machine in its tracks.
Woo! Yeah, baby!
Walking through, I push every single paint can over because who wouldn't in this scenario? Before eventually realizing I've got to break into someone's house and pour paint all over it. I begin scratching and meowing to be as much of an inconvenience as possible before popping my second trophy of the playthrough, called A Little Chatty for meowing 100 times. Probably the easiest silver trophy I'd ever earn in my life. We venture forward and stumble upon this robot humanoid which scares the shit out of Little Fred Jr. before we end up going to the robot and basically time Mike Tyson one-punch KO the robot. Eventually, we get to the point where Little Fred Jr. is being attacked by an army of chuds. We deck our tiny little legs out of there, avoiding the blood-sucking parasites with great precision and acting like we are from the Matrix. We find ourselves inside some kind of apartment where we have to jump on a keyboard to spell out absolute gibberish in order to somehow open up a door. We end up grabbing all these different batteries to open up yet another door. Finding a small security drone hidden on a shelf, I end up going around in circles with absolutely no clue on where to go before eventually finding a table used to revive this weird little creature. The droid becomes attached to me, which is a first, as Little Fred Jr. ends up crawling across the floor with the newly acquired vest. We head over to a door with a pin and enter the number it wants from us, allowing us to exit the apartment and finally see some sense of outside for the first time in years. We end up picking up a postcard and head on down where we see some more robot humanoid figures that end up treating me like I've got prime 2020 coronavirus. Before stumbling upon a brave soul, our new companion called B12 ends up translating this mighty warrior's language and he ends up welcoming us to his village. As we earn our next trophy, which is for simply allowing B12 to translate the robot. We end up going through various different buildings looking for notebooks that we can hand to one of the fellow robots called Momo. Along the way, we end up making one of the robots miss his pass by meowing extremely aggressively, which ends up with paint just outside the store below. I'm basically vengeance. Shortly after collecting what I thought was all the notebooks, I head to Momo to hand him the books just to realise that we were missing one. So we had to backtrack and look intensely for the missing notebook, which also allowed us to earn our next trophy, which was called Catapult, for jumping 500 times. After the trophy popped, we got to the next notebook in record time, and handed Momo the final notebook, which meant he would now fix our transceiver. He sends us outside to get on top of a tower to install the transceiver, which of course we obliged to. Hopping in a bucket to slide down, in which we realised we could spin around insanely aggressively, which was way too much fun to pass up on. We traversed through, avoiding the mini chuds, and eventually making our way to the elevator, which allows us to get to the top of the tower. An army of aggressive chuds begin summoning, chasing my little small legs halfway across the site. We narrowly avoid them before jumping into the elevator, allowing us to be safe and get to the top of the tower. We place the transmitter on the radio tower, which means we can now finally move forward and unlock more of B12's memories. We end up back at the slums and meet up with Momo in the bar, as you usually do. And this is where we get introduced to a new character called Seamus, who we are told by the bartender that he hasn't been the same since his father left him. Much like myself. We follow Momo and on our way earn our next trophy called Curiosity Killed the Cat, which was earned by simply putting a paper bag over our heads. We arrive at another building where Momo gives us a new notebook for the dock, and we end up breaking into Seamus's house. The notebook mentions a secret room, which we end up looking intensely for. We end up finding it behind a photo frame, and we look at the clock's hands to input the code needed. We walk through the door, finding a broken tracker and showing Seamus our new item. He ends up tasking us, a small little cat, to fix the broken tracker, so naturally we go looking around for someone else to fix it, called Elliot. There's a few smaller tasks we need to do in order to get Elliot to fix the tracker, but we get there in the end. He fixes the tracker for us and we bring it back to Seamus. He leads us through yet another door, and we keep going forward before realising that the chuds have returned.
It's pretty difficult to put into words how disgusted I am, how depressed I am.
They end up chasing us yet again. We avoid them all before landing on a car, which ultimately ends up injuring little Fred Jr. We recover and venture forward before finding Doc. We point him to a massive light and he tells us we need to put the fuse in so he can turn it into a working weapon against the chuds. We successfully get the Chud Exterminator 6000 working and end up having to cover for Doc so he can get back to Seamus. They end up having a loving reunion and we head down below where Momo offers to give us a ride through the sewers. We do some minor jumps and use our new device, where we end up reaching a dead end and Momo has to manually lift the door. Walking through, we see the most disgusting thing you've ever seen, traversing through the entire arena before encountering even more chuds that genuinely just want to eat my ass. We avoid them all before entering another area which just wants us to turn on both consoles either side. We do that and head into a cutscene where B12 ends up remembering more of his past. Chuds begin starting a revolution and chase our fine asses, but B12 ends up using the device to get rid of most of them and ends up overpowering the device. We pick him up and have yet another chase scene, which ends with us sliding under a closed door. We pat B12 on the back, telling him to get up, and eventually he does. He hacks the fan so we can progress forwards. As we walk along, we come across a new robot called Baladin, as he introduces us to what I would call Sanctuary. Along the way, we earn our next trophy, called Catastrophe, for ultimately knocking over the game the two robots were playing. Once we reach the top, we encounter someone called Zabaltazar. I'm going to be completely honest, I do not know how to say that name, but he tells us that we need to find someone called Clementine if we want to see the outside again, so naturally, we head to Midtown to find her. We also end up getting a new trophy called Catwalk for simply ending up at Midtown. We wander around Midtown before eventually encountering someone who tells us she's in her apartment in the building we are in. We find her apartment and get in with a convenient cat-friendly hole. Clementine doesn't seem happy to see us at all, but once we show her the photo, she quickly realizes we are an ally. She tells us to sneak into the factory and to carefully avoid the sentry droids. So we head outside to find the shifty guy she recommended to us and stumble upon him in an alleyway. He tells us he needs a disguise, so we head to a store nearby and wake up some dude who fell asleep drunk as hell, and hop in a box for him to lift us into the store since one dude is protecting it like his life depends on it. We also pick up the vest from a shop right outside by using a cassette tape we earned earlier. We go back to the shady alleyway guy and pass him the clothing. He tells us to jump in a box as he carries us through security. Once through, we try avoiding a security drone, but once we do, we find out we need to avoid more, which we need to do with our incredible gaming skills.
What do you mean by that?
We end up at a room where we need to move these robot blocks to each pressure plate, which allows us to pick up the battery. We head back to Midtown to go back to Clementine, avoiding the security drones to get to her apartment, and we find out that she is missing. There's a note on the wall providing a hint as to where she might be around the apartment. Once getting all the clues, we place together she is at a nightclub, which I personally wouldn't complain about. A friendly guy hanging outside the window gladly allows us into the club where we can now get a drink. For the guy who's holding the lever we need to get to the top. We extend the platforms and jump across before eventually coming across a robot who thankfully lets us pass. We head up some stairs and encounter Clementine, who was held hostage, and then the shady guy from earlier appears out of nowhere. Like, you're telling me that the guy who was lurking in some alleyway on his own wasn't actually evil? Couldn't have guessed that one, but he ends up getting the droids to shoot us, and we wake up in cat jail. We swing our way out and begin looking for Clementine. Eventually, we run into her on the top floor, and she points us towards some keys, which we grab with haste. Handing them back to Clementine, she heads out of her cell, and we begin looking for B12. We see him in a cell guarded by a ton of sentry droids, and try to figure out a plan so we can break him out. We do some small parkour and find our way over to him after shutting down the barrier, picking him up and quickly running away back to Clementine, who boots him back up. We hack through a door and end up needing to break another with a brick, which we get Clementine to do since we are just a cat. Moving forward, we need to play a game of tag with the droids and lock them into a room so they can't get Clementine. Once we manage to do that, we find a car which Clementine heads into and tells us to open up the door so we can escape. We flip the switch and she ends up driving off without us. We have to sprint our fast little legs and end up jumping onto the back, pulling off our first prison break. A cutscene ensues which shows Clementine driving extremely safely through Midtown. She takes a stop and tells us to go, basically offering herself as a sacrifice so we can see our feline friends again. Definitely not so we can help save everyone in the slums or anything. We go through the train station and come across a thing where we can place our battery, allowing us to power up the train station, which takes us to this extremely nice place where there's some small puzzles we need to complete in order to get to the server room. We end up having to let B12 hack 3 different computers. Once completed, he goes to open up the world, but ends up basically dying in the process, in which a pretty sad scene plays out where little Fred Jr. cuddles up to the body of B12. It almost made me cry, I can't lie. But it ends up working, and everyone in the slums finally sees sunlight for the first time in forever. We move on and head outside through a red door, finding the outside, in which we end up back to where we started and earn our first gold trophy called Eye Opener for completing the main story of the game. Now that the story is complete, we have quite a few miscellaneous trophies we need to go for in order to achieve 100% completion. The first trophy we go for is the Territory Trophy, which is obtained by scratching at least once in every chapter. This was a pretty easy trophy to achieve thanks to the chapter select feature, which thankfully allowed us to basically get to each destination we needed with ease. Whilst we were going for that trophy, it only made sense to also go for the Badges trophy, which was just a simple one for collecting all the badges, which were only tiny side missions for the robots in which they'd hand us a badge in completion. We luckily did that and unlocked all the badges, and the trophy finally popped. Once completing that, we gathered all of B12's memories with the same stuff we were doing before, and unlocked another gold trophy called I Remember. We gathered some other trophies along the way too, and well, here's just like a taste of a couple of them, but none of them matter too much. They're just more like miscellaneous ones that like add to the trophy count and stuff. So enjoy this like small like kind of like little montage. That is when we reached the part I dreaded, the I Am Speed trophy, which I thought going into this game would be the most difficult one. Due to the fact I'm like not really good at speedrunning games, and the main story took me roughly 8 hours. So I not only have to cut my gameplay down to half, but then I have to half it again. But we end up locking in and go for the trophy, with a helpful guide I follow along the way. And thankfully for us, we barely screw it up and managed to complete the trophy. Thankfully, we did it on the first try, which meant we didn't have to like try and do it all over again, which I'm so glad about personally. Now, we have 2 trophies left, and one of them is just about doing a chase scene without one of the little chuds clinging onto you. And naturally, you think, oh, that's not too bad, that sounds doable. And well, you'd be right, but also, fuck this trophy. I think it was the hardest trophy on the game, and I don't think I've ever raged so much on something so simple. These little chuds somehow kept attaching themselves to me on every corner. I had to do zigzag movements just to get them all the way off my fucking ass. It was so incredibly frustrating, but after multiple attempts, and I mean multiple, we finally pop the trophy and complete this absolutely horrific challenge. Now all that's left to do is allow little Fred Jr. here to sleep for 1 hour. It's a simple and easy trophy to do, and that's why I left it to last. Once that's done, the game has officially been 100%ed. I did really enjoy going for the platinum on this game. It was a very simple and enjoyable platinum, except for that one trophy, but apart from that, I really enjoyed this game and would recommend it for anyone who enjoys story games or just cats. With all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. Many thanks and goodbye.